Yeah, welcome back indeed. Indeed. Alongside Adam Tuliper, I am Christopher Harrison. This is, well, you can read it right there on the screen. In any event, let's go ahead and kind of keep on keeping on. That we've been doing some basic class design. We took a look a little bit at how to manage our databases. But you know, every object that we create is not just going to be strings and numbers.
It's not going to be a standalone class.
Yeah.
We got some sort of...
This is, you couldn't see this, but Adam was doing this. This is now going to be the universal signal for doing relationships. Yeah. So our classes are going to have some form of a relationship with one another. And so we can go in, we're miking up Adam as we speak. There we go. Hey, now we can hear Adam.
I was doing the hand motion, so it's okay.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. This is going to be now the silent movie part of this. But in any event, bringing this all back. So our basic classes are all well and good, but we are going to have relationships. So our artists are going to have albums, our albums are going to have artists, and so forth. So how do we go in and manage this? And so we're going to take a look at the three different types of relationships that are available: our one-to-many, our one-to-one, and our many-to-many relationships. And let's start with by far the most common, which is the one-to-many relationships. Now, a one-to-many relationship, again, the most common, and if we think about that, it's the most common, and based on what we've seen so far, I'm going to quote my buddy John Galloway, who says, it just works, right? And that's what we've seen up until now is, it just works, that we create a class, add some properties,
it's easy.
Decorate it with some attributes as needed, and away we go. So if we wanted something like this, where maybe we've got an artist over here with a name and maybe a bio, and then we've got an album over here with a title and a release date, and we've got multiple albums and one artist, we should just be able to go in and add that in, and away we go. So if we just wanted to create the relationship, should just add the properties. Let's do it. Let's see what happens.
See what happens.
Yeah. What's the worst that could happen?
I'm feeling good about this.
You're feeling good about that. Well, that makes one of us. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look here at our existing application. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to again, a little fanfare there. I'm going to go into my models, and I'm going to create a brand new class, and I'm going to call this album. And hit enter, and I'm going to go in, and I'm going to say public, and I'm going to say prop, bang, bang, and this is going to be album ID, and let's go in and let's say required, and come on, thank you. And let's go in and say string length. I always get asked, why do you put in the name parameters, min length is 2. Why do you put in the parentheses there on like required when it's not actually needed? And the reason for that is this is sort of old school, that back in the old days with like Visual Studio 2002, 2002. Wow. Visual Studio's been out for a long time. 2002, 2003, is you didn't have IntelliSense on the attributes when you typed them in, but if you hit that first parenthesis, it would then fire up the IntelliSense. So it's a real quick check to make sure that you typed it in correctly, and that's just sort of stuck with me ever since. So let's now go in and just say prop, bang, bang, string, and title. Okay, with a get and a set. And so now let's create that relationship. So let's go in and say public, and let's say artist, artist, with a get and a set. So again, just like we normally would, basic property, nothing fancy there. Let's go ahead and grab our artist. Let's go the other direction here, is let's go in and say public list of album, and let's say albums, and get and set. So, really, we haven't done anything that we wouldn't have expected. That we just went in, created that basic relationship. We've got our artist, we've got our albums, they point to one another. We're looking good, right?
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. Now, as we've already seen, if we make a change to the classes, we do need to update the database. So let's go in and update database and hit enter. Chugga. And let's come over here to our little database. Let's hit refresh. And you'll notice that, sure enough, there's our albums and our artists. We're all looking good. And you'll even notice that if I design my artists here and I bring up the relationships, that it creates the relationship exactly the way that we would expect it. So it calls it based on the names of the tables, creates our little foreign key. Everything is all hunky-dory peachy keen. We're looking good so far, right, Adam?
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
I'm feeling good about it.
That makes one of us. So now let's come back over here and let's, create a couple of albums. So let's just go in and say context. I should probably add in albums. That would probably help. Where's my context? Music store, data context. Okay. Copy, paste. And I want album. Okay. There we go. And so now back over here to our initializer, let's go in and say context, albums, add. And let's go in and create a brand new album. And let's go ahead and give this the artist of artist. Now, one of the things that's really cool here is the fact that we've got that auto count. We've got that identity column on the IDs. And so you might be wondering, okay, well, wait a minute. How's it going to know the ID for the album, for the artist, and all that good stuff? Again, when we call save changes at the end, it's automatically going to figure all of that out for us. It's just going to work. So now I can go in and say title. And again, I'm being very creative. First album, just like that. Beautiful. And I'm just going to copy and paste. And let's call this second album. And now I'm going to get a little fancier here. Remember that add returns back the object that we just created. So the other thing that I could do is I could say context, albums, add, new album. And let's go in and just give myself a little bit of room. And let's say artist equals, and I can actually then just write in line create that artist. So if the artist wasn't already there, I can just create it. And then I can go in and say title, and this is going to be my third album. That's what I want to do. When I form my band, it's just going to be first album, second album, third album. And I'm just going to call my band band. Actually, demo band. There we go.
First
all right.
album, second album.
Yay! All right. And so again, if we hit save changes, that will save all of that back. And if I fire up the page here and I go back to our artists page, give this a second to come up. This is now going to create all of those albums and run the initializer behind the scenes for us. Uh-oh, it's going to fail on me because I still have the Management Studio open. I was touching the database. Remember, we told it to drop create always. So, all right. So sure enough, it's got our first artist and our second artist. And if I go back to the Management Studio here, and I go back in to our artist or our albums, let's go in and just say select top 1000. You're going to notice that sure enough, there is all of our albums. So there's our first, our second, and our third. So it did exactly what we expected it to do. This is looking good.
So far, so good.
So far, so good. How you feeling?
Good.
Good. That makes one of us. So now, let's come back over here to Visual Studio, and let's create our details inside of our controller. Controller. Oh, computer. All right. So now, let's go in and say public details, or action result. There we go. Action result details int ID. There we go. And let's say artist equals repository. And we can just simply now call that little get, pass that in. Hey, 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 we did that earlier. Very cool. If artist equals null, because that's what the find is going to do. If it doesn't find it, it's just going to return back null. We can then go ahead and say return a not found result. There we go. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and say return view and pass in the artist that we found. So again, sort of kind of 101 on doing MVC development here. Return. There we go. Let's call the right method. Now, let's go in, right-click, add view. Let's go in and say details. We'll base this on our artist. We'll hit add, chugga, chugga, chugga. So it's automatically got that. I'm just going to get a little fancier down here that I'm just going to create a real quick little list here. Let's just go in and say UL. And then let's go in and say for each var album in model albums. You'll notice that we've got our albums here. And then let's go ahead and display them out. So we'll just simply say li album dot title. Okay. Now, real quick here, yes, I'm going with simple demos. Should I create this as a partial view or a partial controller now rolling into 2015 or MVC 6? Yes, 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 I probably should. Again, we're keeping with simple demos, right?
Simple.
Okay, cool. So this, in theory, should work. How are you feeling, Adam?
Well, I feel good.
You feel good.
Is this still only one of us or two of us now?
No, that's still one of us. So let's go in. Let's go ahead, hit refresh. Let's go in, hit details, and boom.
Oh.
It blows up.
I did feel good.
Yeah, you did.
Adam's sad.
Adam's sad. Well, here's the thing, and I should highlight this. I was expecting that. See, I will always admit when I do a demo that fails and I wasn't expecting. This one I was expecting. That didn't work. What happened? Why in the world, and this is kind of a key here, is you'll notice that we got everybody's favorite error message. Null reference.
What object? Which object? Where? Well,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's one of those things. I always wish they would just give me the variable name.
Yeah.
You know? Help me out.
the big arrow, this one right here,
Yeah.
this list of 5 items.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So what happened? Well, here's the thing, is that Entity Framework is going to use lazy loading by default. Now, Adam is going to talk later on about how to change that. That when we get into doing performance at the end of the day, Adam's going to go in, take a look at doing include and things like that. I sort of gave the secret away, I apologize. But we are going to see how to get around doing lazy loading. But Entity Framework Code First is going to use this by default. The way that the magic behind the scenes is going to work is by utilizing a little dependency injection and inheritance. That Entity Framework is actually going to inherit from your object. It's going to keep an eye on things. And when you go to use that complex object for the first time, it will then go back to the database and load that up. Or, in other words, all of the simple properties are going to be retrieved. That's what's going to happen by default. So our title, release year, all the simple properties are going to be retrieved. When we go to grab artist, Entity Framework is not actually going to grab it right away. It's actually going to put a stub in there. That's what it wants to do. And then the first time that we go to use it, it will then load that data. So when we do a console write line, album title, right here, that is where it's going to go back to the database, and it's now going to load that up, and then we could go ahead, or artist name, that's when it will load that up and give that to us. So when we use that property, it's then going to actually load the data. We, however, need to support that. And the way that we're going to support that is by marking those properties as virtual. So to
Very important.
Yeah, very important. So to kind of back this up is what Entity Framework wants to do is it wants to put a stub into this place. So it's not actually an artist. It's something that looks like an artist. It's the artist formerly named artist. little 80s joke for you. it's not really an artist. It's not actually an object. It's a stub that Entity Framework is going to be keeping an eye on. The only way that it can inject that in there is if we allow it to replace artist with its own object. And the way that we do that is by marking that as virtual. Now, people are, of course, going to ask, wait a minute, can we disable lazy loading? That we don't want to have to go back to the database multiple times to go get that data. And the short answer to that question is absolutely yes, you can do that. The longer answer is what you need to do is tell Entity Framework what you want to go grab. And you're going to do that by using include. And when you use include, what you'll actually notice is that it will then go ahead and do the join and bring all of that data in. Now, before I go back to the demo and show how to add on virtual and make this work, you might be wondering, okay, Christopher, is that it? Is that all I need to know? Well, as it turns out, not really. See, the other thing is this, is that loaded property is going to be essentially treated as null, and that's exactly what we just saw. So let's imagine a scenario that I go ahead and I bring up the artist page and I click edit, because I want to edit the artist. Actually, sorry, I'm going to strike that and reverse it. Let's say I go to an album page. I go to an album page and I click edit on album. Now, as we know, our album is supposed to have an artist, but it's not going to be loaded right away. So our artist at this point is null. So I go in, I update the title of the album, I update the release year, and I click save. When it sends it back to the server, our artist is going to be null. And so it's going to try to save it back to the database as null. And it's now going to give us a referential integrity error, which, again, is a problem. Now, in theory, you could program around this. Don't. Make your life easier. Now, what you want to do is add in a foreign key property. So if I just simply say artist ID from inside the album, again, Entity Framework is going to look at that and it's going to go, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do there. And it's automatically going to set that up as the foreign key. So now going back to our scenario, because of the fact that the number is a value type, a simple type, it's going to load up that artist ID. So now we'll have that. I click save. It's sent back to the server. It's going to have that ID. So when it goes to put it back into the database, it will still have the ID. So it's not going to try and save back a null there. So that's the other real quick thing. So how do we solve that? I've got the full slide here that we add in the property to point to it, and the Entity Framework will automatically pick up on that. If, however, we want to use a different name, then we can use our foreign key attribute to solve that problem. So now let's go in and do our one-to-many relationship for reals. Yo.
For real.
For real. All right. Back to Visual Studio. All right, so now I want to go back to my artist. Let's flag this as virtual. And I'm going to go back to my album. And I'm going to flag this as virtual. And then the way that I always put together my classes, I'll put the foreign key property on top of the actual object. So I'll just simply say, yeah.
Keeps them together, organized.
Exactly. Artist ID, and yeah, I'm right. And then get and set. Perfect. There we go. So now let's go in and do a build. Let me make sure that my management studio is closed. It is. And let's go ahead and Control F5 and back to artists. Chugga. And let's go in and hit details. And now you're going to notice that it works. So now you're going to notice that we've got first artist for our name, and then there is their albums. I suppose I could get a little fancier here by going into my view, mon view. That is the extent of my French there. It's pretty terrible, I know. Where's my details? There we go. And let's just go in and say H2, and let's say albums. There we go. Just a little thing just to make that look a little bit better. Oops. It would help if I could type. There we go. So now we've got albums in there. Albums! Yay. Okay, cool. So now Adam, now I'm feeling good.
Now you're feeling good.
Now I'm feeling good.
I don't feel so good anymore.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm kidding.
All right. Okay,
I was expecting this.
back to our slides. You were expecting this.
That's why I felt good to begin with.
I like it. Okay, so you kind of knew where we were going. Now, there is one last important rule to note here, and I think the easiest way to see it is to just get in and do it. My management studio, let's connect, and let's go into our databases. Let's go into our tables, a right-click, design, and relationships, and OK. Hey, Adam. What do you notice about that delete rule?
It's going to cascade all those deletes on down.
So if I delete an artist, what's going to happen to all of that artist's albums?
Everything goes with it.
Everything's going to go with it. Is that what we want?
No.
No, probably not. And unfortunately, this is the default. There is no attribute to go in and modify that behavior, but there is an option inside the Fluent API to go in and change that. So if you do want to get rid of that, you can do that. Okay. All right. Now then, let's roll forward into one-to-one relationships. And, you know, the theme of the day really has been that Entity Framework, by developers for developers, knows what's coming. And so one-to-one relationships, you know they're not common, right, Adam?
Correct.
I know they're not common.
Who else knows?
The audience knows. And then last but not least, Entity Framework knows it. And so as a result, it's not expecting one-to-many, or it's not expecting one-to-one relationships. And what will wind up happening is it will give you a circular error, that it's going to look and go, okay, well, you've got these two classes that are pointing at one another. I can't figure out which one is the parent and which one is the child. You've got to help me out a little bit more here than just simply doing that. So it's not expecting that. So what you need to then do is help Entity Framework out a little bit by going in and identifying what the relationship is. And the way that you're going to do that is by going into the child class and adding on the foreign key attribute. So, for example, let's say that this is my UML diagram kind of real quickly here. And I've got type. I'm a little too big. I think this is going to be good, though. Artist. So we'll go in and say artist. And then maybe over here, I've got artist details. And so back over here, I've got things like my artist ID. And I've got my name. And then maybe over here on our artist details, I again have the artist ID because it's going to be a one-to-one relationship, but maybe I also have the bio, and maybe I also have the photo that would go along with them. You know, because maybe we're not using the bio and the photo all that often, so we've decided for design purposes, for performance purposes, that we want to offload that to somewhere else. And so we can go in and do that just by going in and creating the relationship. Again, the problem is that Entity Framework isn't going to know what we're going to mean here. So what I would want to do is decorate this artist ID as the foreign key, and then it will be able to figure out how to do the relationship back and forth. Or to actually see it, let's go in and just fire up Visual Studio. Visual Studio, hooray! Okay. I love the applause. Yeah. Thank you, Barry. All right. So now let's go in and let's say artist details. And let's go in and let's say public. And let's go in and say artist ID. So we're going to say public int artist ID with a get and a set. Now, we sort of have two problems right away, or one big problem right away. And that is, of course, that we're not using artist details ID as the ID. We're using artist ID as the ID. So it doesn't know what to do with this. It doesn't know that that's going to be the primary key. So the first thing that I'm going to need to do is decorate that with the key attribute. Yeah, give it a hint and say, hey, psst, by the way, I want you to use this as the key, which to kind of roll this back into our prior conversation about utilizing our attributes to be able to change things up. If for whatever reason you didn't want to call your primary key class name ID or just simply ID, then you could just go in and use the key attribute to go in and do that. So now let's go in and let's add on our string for the bio. And then let's go in and say prop and then artist and artist. So now I've created the relationship going one direction. And now we can go back into artist and let's add it in the other way. And I forgot virtual. I just noticed that. I'll fix that in a second. Virtual and artist details. Artist details, and then we'll add in our get and our set. All right, so now let's make sure that we mark this as virtual. Now, at this point, Entity Framework doesn't know what to do, unfortunately, because all that it sees is that I've got an artist that's pointing at album details, and I've got, or artist details, and I've got artist details that's pointing at artist. There's no idea what to do with this and what to make of it. So I need to tell it, hey, look, artist details is really actually a child of artist. And the way that I do that is by identifying the artist ID as the foreign key as well. So if I add in, there we go, my foreign key, now it's going to know how to create that relationship. So let's just string name. There we go. Just make sure we point it at the other side. Artist. There we go. Now I'm good. All right. So let's go in. Let me make sure that Management Studio is closed. It is. Let me go back in. And I'm just going to fire up the artist page. And so this came up. So this dropped and recreated our database. And now if we just fire back up the Management Studio, and let's just look to make sure that it created our relationship.
See what's in there.
Yep. And sure enough, if I go in, you'll notice that we've got our artist and our artist details. You'll also notice that if I hit design again and I bring back up our relationships, that it has in fact created that relationship that we would have expected.
Perfect.
So it's got all that for us. Fantastic. Beautiful. Okay. There we go. And so there is that. Now, the last little thing then is, what about many-to-many relationships? Well, the thing about many-to-many relationships is a relational database doesn't actually support many-to-many relationships. It's sort of one of those like funny things. You talk about many-to-many relationships, but the relational database doesn't actually support them. That what you need is you need a join table in the middle to allow all of that to take place.
Yep.
Here's the good news. Once again, Entity Framework knows this. I'm loving the cheery, Barry.
Woo.
Yay! And so, once again, we just simply need to go in and add the properties, and then Entity Framework will automatically set up the join table for us. Yep.
Brilliant.
Yep. So, let's go in and demo this. All right. Now, slide that over. Cool, cool, cool. And let's do this. All right. I'm going to, real quick on models, let me just add in a brand new class. And I'm going to call this reviewer, because an album could, of course, have multiple reviews that are written by reviewers. So I'm going to say public class reviewer. And let's go in prop, boom, boom. And this is going to be our reviewer ID. And let's go in and say public, or just prop, boom, boom, string, and name. And now our reviewer could review multiple albums. So we'll go in and say public list of artists and whoops, list of albums. Come on, Christopher. There you go. Albums. And you could go in again with the attributes and rename that. So if you wanted that to maybe be called reviews or something like that, you could go in and do that. I'm going to keep it a little bit easier, so I'm just going to go like that. And let's make sure that I add in virtual, which I'm going to do. And now let's come back over here to our artist. And then one more time, let's just go in and say public virtual list of reviewers. And let's call this reviewers. And again, with our get and our set. Now, so I've just added in our artist pointing to our reviewers. I added in our reviewers reporting to our, I'm just bound and determined to put that onto artist. I'm sorry. Let's put that into the right place, shall we? I'm getting hungry. There we go.
Close to lunch.
Now it's on album. That's where we want it. Okay, so one more time. I'm just going to look at the database here. Sort of the simplest way to see it. There we go. And now let's just fire back up our management studio. And let's go into our database and our tables. And now what you're going to notice is that sure enough, there is that little table there in the middle. And then you would also notice that if I hit design and I brought up the relationships, that it's got the relationships with the other two tables.
Perfect. So 2 tables, join table in the middle.
Yep.
Create it all automatically.
Exactly. And so the real takeaway, as far as relationships go, that I want you to get out of all of this is the fact that for the most part, Entity Framework just figured it out. And so the only real thing that we had to do is just make sure that we mark as virtual and make sure that we add in the ID when we're on the child pointing back to the parent. And that's it. That's the real 2 keys there. Now, it's going to be a little interesting because I'm actually looking at the timer here, and typically we try to go with about 50-minute modules, and so we've been talking now for, according to my little timer, 32 minutes, which means that I've got 17 minutes and 55 seconds left. And, you know, I could go ahead and cut the module early, but I'm going to do something that every single presenter has been trained not to do, which is to just go a different direction and do a brand new live demo that they didn't test ahead of time. I'm going to do a brand new live demo that I didn't test ahead of time. Did you just throw up the explosion? Awesome. Okay. So this may blow up, but this is something that I just sort of realized as we were walking through this that we didn't put in, which is kind of important, which is inheritance. We didn't put in inheritance. And so now's a perfect time to sneak that in. So let's do inheritance.
Perfect.
So let me go in and I'm going to create a very simple scenario here. So let's say that we have artist. Looks like a 4-year-old grabbed a crayon. And so I want to...
I have a 4-year-old. He's pretty good.
I want to set up down below here a brand new class that inherits from artist, and maybe we call this solo artist. And maybe on solo artist, I'm going to add in sort of an arbitrary property here. I'm going to say instrument. Like that. So whatever instrument it is that they happen to be known for, that's what I'm going to add in. And yes, I understand this is a little contrived, but that's okay. My goal is not to create a perfect music store. My goal is to teach inheritance. Yeah. So I'm hoping everybody is going to forgive me here. So let me use one of my favorite features inside Visual Studio, which is the close all but this. So I'm just going to right-click close all but this. So there's our artist. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add on a brand new class here that I'm going to call solo artist. And public. And then let's go ahead and have this inherit from artist. And then let's just go in and add on our little property. So let's say public string, and let's say instrument. And we'll just add that on with a get and a set. So because of the fact that it inherits, it automatically has the artist ID, it automatically has the albums, automatically has the artist details. All of those are still going to be there. I think the best place to start is let's go take a look at what's going to happen inside the database and how the database is going to model this. So we'll just go back to artist, let it create it. Trigger. Cool. And so now let's open up our management studio and hit connect. By the way, you'll notice that while I was doing these demos that I haven't been going back and running update database. And the reason that I haven't done that is because I'm dropping and recreating the database each time. So when I drop and create the database, it's going to create the database
It's all brand
correctly.
new every time. Otherwise, you would have to do the update database each time, or even add new migrations, but you have automatic migrations enabled.
Exactly. Okay, so let's go in and take a look at our tables here. And what you're going to notice is that we've got albums, we've got artist details, we've got artists, we've got reviewer albums, we've got reviewers. You know what we don't have? Solo artists. And the reason that we don't have solo artists is because our solo artist, by using inheritance, is an artist. Exactly. So here's what happened, is you're going to notice that we now have two brand new columns on artists. That we have instrument and we have discriminator. So the instrument is, of course, where the instrument is going to go. Discriminator is how Entity Framework is going to know whether we're dealing with an artist or dealing with a solo artist. And so now, if I go in and I create a brand new query, now I say select everything from DBO artists, and let's make sure that I'm using the right database. Come here. There we go. There we go. So now you're going to notice that on our discriminator, it's going to be artist. Well, let's go ahead and create a solo artist, shall we?
We shall.
Okay. So let me just get rid of that, and let me come back over here to Visual Studio, and let's go back to our context initializer. And let's just go in and say context artists add. And I can actually just add in a brand new solo artist here. Because after all, it's an artist, right? So let's go in and do this, and let's go in and say name equals solo artist, and let's go in and say instrument equals, and let's go in and say guitar. I really wish that I could play an instrument. I can't. Actually, the instrument I really would love to be able to play is piano, but that's a different conversation.
It's never too late to start.
Absolutely. All right, cool. So there is my my brand new solo artist to then go ahead and save changes. I like your positive outlook on life there. Unfortunately, I have no musical talent whatsoever. So, yeah. Anyway, all right.
I play guitar and classical guitar and heavy metal guitar, and I picked up piano later on in life. And I believe you can do it. You might not be coming out with all this amazing, fresh new music, but I believe you can pick one up and play something that you learn to hear. It's repetition, right? Just like with code.
All right.
You ever sit down for the first time and learn code, and you're like, how does somebody do this? It's amazing. I could never do that. How do they write an operating system? How do you do that? And now you know, right?
Okay.
After years of doing it, you kind of piece it together.
I should take a piano lesson.
You should do it. You should.
All right. Okay. I like it. All right. So here's what I want you to notice. So you're going to notice here that there's our solo artist. So it did, in fact, save it back. Cool, cool, cool. And now let's go ahead and fire back up the management studio. Trigger. And let's go ahead and go grab new query. Select everything from DBO artists. Whoops. Art. Come here. There we go. And now what you're going to notice is that sure enough, it saved back our piano and it's got our solo artist right there as the discriminator. So that's how it's going to know. And so what it's doing is it's using a single table for its default inheritance model, and it's using this discriminator to figure out which class is which. Now, to answer the question that a lot of people probably have, which is, well, what happens if maybe I wanted to create another table off to the side for our solo artist? Could I put that over there? The short answer, of course, is yes. The longer answer is it requires firing up the Fluent API and doing it that way. Okay, last little thing that's worth highlighting here is let's go back to my Visual Studio and let's go back to my little artist repository. Okay, and all right. So here's what I'm going to do is I'm going to say return db set. And so from inside of db set, what you're going to notice is that I've got a lot of different methods that are available to me that I can use to go in and query. See, I told you that I was doing something that presenters should never, 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 never do. And that is
new demos on the fly.
New demos on the fly. Nope, that's not it. See, I never should have looked at the clock and realized that we had extra time. That was my mistake. In any event, one of the things that you do have the ability to do is you have the ability to do a query and then specify that you only want the items back of a particular type. So you can say, all right, well, I only want you to get me, and I'm just not seeing the method. Maybe somebody's throwing it into the chat window. If I stall long enough. But it is possible to actually go in and just say, all right, well, I only want the solo artists back. And you're not finding it.
Looking at the chat window right now.
Yeah, okay. All right.
The live lookups are always tough.
Yeah, that's okay.
You hit a little snag, you're like, well, I can't really search it right now.
Yeah, exactly. So in any event, I'll come back. I'll check this in, and we'll hit this real quickly after lunch, and I'll show off the rest of how we can go grab it. And unfortunately, my brain is just failing because I'm hungry. But the whole point that I'm really wanting to make here, and this is why I wanted to just do this real quick aside, because I realized that we hadn't talked about inheritance, and that is kind of an important topic, is just to show off that, yes, Entity Framework can handle inheritance, and that, yes, one more time, that Entity Framework will just sort of do exactly what you would expect it to do, that you just simply build your classes the way that you would typically build your classes, and then it will go off and do the rest for you. All right. What do you say we grab some food? I'm checking my time here. What do you say we grab some food?
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I'm hungry. And then we'll go ahead and we'll start at the top of the hour. So we'll see you guys. Then.
See you soon.